Hi. So there's been breaking news in the last few hours of a vehicle attack in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Apparently there was a Christmas parade there, and five people have been killed and 40 injured. So it's a serious incident. But unfortunately, in the United States, it seems that there is so much violence now that there's something that this is barely even surprising anymore. It wasn't a mass shooting, but it was an act of violence. Um, this year, of course, there have been mass shootings in Indianapolis, in Atlanta, in Boulder, Colorado, and in there was one other location which eludes me, but four major mass shootings just this year alone in the United States. Um, it's too early to say what this was, if it was in any way related to the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, because it's in the same state, or if it's something else. But yeah, um, I think American society, it sort of feels like the late 60s. There was a time then when there was a lot of urban violence, and it feels like that again. It feels like American society is at risk to being desensitized to violence. We aren't much better. I mean, we don't have the same problem with gun violence, thankfully, but um, I don't know if it's a pandemic or what, but it just seems that there is so many examples out there of just mindless violence. Um, and it sort of relates to the video I'm making here. I want to talk about rehabilitation, which is a word that is often used when we talk about crime and justice. Now, let me just put my cards on the table. Some of you will already know this because it's a subject I've spoken about numerous times on this channel. It's a subject I feel very strongly about, crime and justice. Um, Probably stronger than any other domestic issue. And there's a lot of important issues out there. There's healthcare, there's transport, there's infrastructure, um, all important issues. But there's something about the subject of crime that particularly resonates with me. I think partly because I've had experience of it. When I was 16, I had to move out of my home. This was now, we're talking basically 20 years ago. I had to move home at that time because jobs tormented my family. So my dad made the decision that we would move. But I think it was probably that had a very resonant effect on my way of thinking on the subject. Um, I've had a few incidents since then. I had my bike stolen, but nothing like that. Anyway, whenever I hear a case of crime, and particularly certain kinds of crime, especially gang activity, when you hear about teenage thugs who beat a young father to death because he's remonstrated with them about noise or vandalism. Things like that really affect me. Um, and another thing that really bothers me, um, and I spend a lot of time thinking about, probably more time than is healthy, is sentencing and the state of sentencing in this country, which I feel far too often is far too lenient. I make no secret of the fact that I'm pretty conservative on this area. In other areas, not so much. I'm more to the left. But when it comes to crime, put simply, I believe if you hurt society, you have to pay a price. Um, that brings me to the subject of rehabilitation. So, what got me thinking about this evening was, well, this morning actually, is that there was a post on a debate thread about Larry Miller. He is the CEO of Nike Jordan, which is the trainer sneaker company. It's a branch, I believe, of Nike. Anyway, the report was about the fact that he's now a successful businessman. In 1965, as a 16-year-old, he was a gang member, and him and his gang shot an 18-year-old to death for no other reason than the guy bumped into them and they were out for revenge because one of their friends had been killed. And that was it. They didn't know this guy, they just killed him. Now, he'd done prison time, but the point about the Fred was, well, he's now successful and he's done something with his life. So this shows that people should be given second chances and rehabilitation works. Um, and I have mixed views on that. On one hand, looking at the report, he said that his experience has haunted him and he kept it secret for a long time. And he's writing his memoirs, hoping to turn young men away from this life, hoping to inspire others. Well, that's good. But I do have a few questions. Has he used his wealth, for example, to give any sort of help to victims of crime? I mean, it's one thing saying he hopes that young people will be inspired by his story, but I feel he has a moral obligation if he has become wealthy as a result of his work at Nike. And he's now admitting to this. It was a long time ago, 1965, but his success wouldn't necessarily be of any comfort to the family of the 18-year-old that he killed. And I'm not putting a damper on something like that. Clearly, it's better that he has had a successful life than if he was a hardened criminal and continued committing violent crimes. Clearly, that's a good thing. But it also reminds me of the actor Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg, A-list actor. I like Wahlberg as an actor. I've seen quite a lot of his films, but it's no secret that when he was a teenager, he was a young offender. And in one of those incidents, Wahlberg and his gang, or the gang that he was a member of, attacked a Vietnamese American man and left the guy half blind. Now, in this series of crimes that Wahlberg was involved in as a teenager, in one of these assaults, he served 45 days in prison. 45 days. That isn't even 2 months. Now, clearly, Wahlberg is another success story insofar as he's become a successful actor. He's a household name. He's become a multimillionaire as a result of his acting. But again, my question is, has Wahlberg given any money to victims of crime? Has he support youth project in Boston? Maybe he has. So fair play to him if that's the case. But I think if you commit a serious crime and then you find yourself in a position where you are released and you have built up your life and you've turned your life around, I think you should use your wealth or your influence for something positive. And to me, that should be a direct thing. If, for example, you have hurt an innocent person, I would say there is a moral responsibility to give part of your fortune to a victims fund, something like that. Um, and I know not everyone would agree with that, but and obviously it can't be legally mandated or anything like that. But it's something that I personally feel would be the direct way of showing remorse. Um, but the other thing about Larry Miller and cases like that, it isn't one size fits all. There are some criminals who cannot be rehabilitated. Here's the thing I want to say about rehabilitation, though. I'm certainly not against it as a concept. I understand the idea that if we just had punishment and punishment alone, that would be punitive because nothing would ever change. Criminals would just feel angry at the system and they'll come out more angry and they'll reoffend. I get that argument. So there is definitely a practical side to rehabilitation. Absolutely. And most judicial systems, even in hardline states, have some form of rehabilitation. But I firmly, firmly believe that rehabilitation must come with some caveats. Now, before I get into what I believe those caveats should be, I think that the liberal left have an attitude to crime and justice whereby they sort of think crime committed, oh, let's rehabilitate that person. And they forget the punishment part in the middle. You cannot have rehabilitation without punishment. And, I don't understand why punishment is seen as a taboo word. It's part of justice. It should be part of justice. One of the biggest mistakes the liberal left makes when it comes to crime is confusing punishment with revenge. Not the same thing at all. If someone commits a serious crime, I'm thinking of crimes such as arson, premeditated murder, rape, as opposed to defensive murder, rape, um, violent assault, um, large financial theft, these sort of things that really impact people's lives. Those sort of crimes. The idea that someone can simply be rehabilitated from that sort of crime without any consequence is utterly insane. It is utterly, utterly insane. Now, I'm thinking of the case recently, the gang in Manchester who targeted a vulnerable man, killed him. And the ringleader of that gang um, got a surprisingly stiff sentence, actually, by British standards, 23 years before he's up for parole. Now, that's surprisingly stringent. For once, it's probably the right outcome. More often than not, younger offenders, he's technically an adult now, so he's not classed as a young offender, but more often than not, they get a tap on the wrist. That's probably the right outcome. But when you look at that sort of case, he literally was smiling in the courtroom. He had no remorse. I would say he's a psychopath. Um, I think that this idea that you could get somebody like that and you could just rehabilitate them immediately is insane. Now, in his case, when in the year 20, what would that be? 2044, when he is up for parole, at that time, it must come with the caveat that A, he is genuinely remorseful, not just remorse because he wants out, genuinely remorseful, that he's genuinely willing to change, i.e., to be rehabilitated in society, that B, he is safe to be re-entered into society, that he doesn't have a violent tendency. Something like that could be looked at by his time in prison. Has he attacked other inmates? Has he attacked staff, etc.? Um, and C, has he done time? Well, in his case, he will have, so that's already self-explanatory. But that's what I think the caveat to rehabilitation should be. Anyone who, they don't like the word punishment, but they're really quick to preach about rehabilitation. I really question their moral compass. Why? Because that says to me that they're not thinking about consequences. They're not thinking about how the offender learns. Because they're saying, oh, well, they've done this terrible thing, so let's just rehabilitate them and hope for the best. How do you teach someone that they have to be accountable for their actions if they're not being punished for their actions? That's ridiculous. That's like saying to a child, if you have a child, right, and they're picking on another child, you're not going to take them aside and say, "Oh, please don't do that again," and then just get on with it. If most decent parents, if their child is being badly behaved, they're going to punish them in some way. They might be confiscating pocket money from them. It might be, go to bed early with no bedtime stories. That's obviously a very um, elementary example. But the principle of this is that I don't think you can change people by not putting a responsibility on them. Now, some people might say rehabilitation is a form of punishment because there's implications with it. There's a certain onus put on the offender. To an extent, there is, but it depends on the gravity of the crime. I mean, you cannot tell me that if a gang member beats someone to death, an appropriate response is that they do some community service. Uh, and meanwhile, they get some sort of course in, I don't know, language skills or something. That is just insanity. A crime as serious as beating a stranger to death has to be a long prison sentence. That's a consequence for an action. And I must admit, something I've always struggled with, something I've had very limited patience with, is this liberal left sort of knee jerk reaction to crime that, oh, well, it's punitive to punishment them. Let's just give them a tap on the wrist. Let's rehabilitate them. Now, they might say that the right or more conservative people on this subject, like myself, are knee jerk because we just want to punish. Not true. I don't want to just punish. Punishment alone would be punitive. With a few exceptions, I think that some people can never be rehabilitated. I think you get a serial killer, or you get, for example, someone who has murdered 10 children. You do get extreme cases like that. I do not believe a character like that can ever, 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 ever be released. We do have some offenders in this country who have whole life tariffs, which means they will die behind bars. And even in those cases, there's a case that they should be isolated from other inmates as they could pose a threat to other inmates. I do believe there are some criminals that are so dangerous and so beyond redemption in terms of chances of rehabilitating them that to even think about it is reckless. Now, if you have someone who at 16 done a terrible thing, but they went into prison, um, shaken up by their own actions, and they do time and they come out genuinely willing to change, I'm open to that as long as they have served time for what they've done. Um, but this is the caveat. One thing that irritates me about those who keep talking and preaching about rehabilitation is they seem to ignore these factors. They seem to look at the concept itself without thinking what are the implications of it. They say, well, it helps to reduce recidivism. Okay, it is a long term solution. Why not reduce crime levels rather than just punishing the criminals? That's fine, but it has to have those caveats. You can't rehabilitate someone if they haven't shown any remorse for what they've done. You can't rehabilitate someone if they haven't paid a price for what they've done. This isn't vengeance. This is fairness. This is justice. And far, far too often in this country, we've seen cases where violent offenders have been released early. I think early release is a travesty. I think sentencing needs to be more honest. But you get early release and then they go out and they commit another violent crime. Clearly, that proves that that sort of rehabilitation doesn't work. So, the liberal left will say punishment doesn't work. What they cannot answer is the fact that you get young offenders who are put on a community sentence, and instead of learning from it, they just continue committing crime. So, what's their answer to that? Clearly, the lenient approach doesn't work. But they won't have that. They won't accept that because they're against punishment. I mean, I think, to be honest, most people, even the liberal left, accept that there has to be some sort of consequences. There is a minority of extremists, and I do consider them extremists, who, given half a chance, would have all prisons closed. I think the likes of the Green Party would, and that is insanity. I think it's absolute insanity. It's putting the public in danger. It doesn't reduce crime. It doesn't actually help the offender because they're not changing their life. And it certainly doesn't help victims. So I'm a conservative on crime, but that doesn't mean I'm against the principle of rehabilitation. And of course, if you have someone that can change, it's in everybody's interest if they do. I don't believe, incidentally, that prison should be brutal. I don't believe in prison vigilantism, for example. And I think that, I don't believe in the Victorian model where they just walk in a circle all day. Um, I think there should be some practical things done in prison, perhaps certain education courses. Perhaps I would say a practical thing could be a strict course whereby they are understanding what they put their victim through. For example, some sort of audio-visual thing. I'm being deadly serious here, where they see through the eyes of their victim. I mean, why not consider something like that? I'm not saying it's guaranteed to work, but at least it should be considered. There's all sorts of things that can be done. Um, but the point is, there has to be punishment. This notion that punishment is punitive is just, I think, just wrong. It's not punitive. It serves a purpose. Punishment on its own might be punitive, but punishment, as a concept, as an approach, is not punitive. It has a purpose. It's a consequence for actions. If I go out and break into someone's home and then I get jailed for that, that's a consequence telling me you are now suffering. You're being punished for your decision to terrorize a fellow citizen for no reason other than greed. So that's my take. I appreciate not everyone will agree with this, but just for the record, I will say that a lot of issues I do sort of see both sides. When it comes to crime and justice, I'm quite dogmatic. I'm quite stubborn. but I don't think I'm extreme. Um, that's how I see it. Let me know your thoughts.